And there must be a typo because my name's on this list. They must mean my wife, Beryl. Here we go with it. So our current class is a wonderful cross-section that includes racing sailors, boat designers, race officers, sailing program coordinators, coaches, all with roots firmly planted on Barnegat Bay. All have made significant contributions to our sport, giving back as much or more than what the sport might have given them. We will honor our 8 inductees individually, first with a video tribute, and then following with their acceptance. So I ask you all to please give these presentations the attention they deserve. It sure looks like you are, so I thank you for that in advance. Our first inductee is Harry Sindle, formerly of the Bay Head Yacht Club. I can't say I ever met Mr. Sindle, but I do vaguely remember the Siddons and Sindle boat shop in Island Heights that built Barnegat 17s and other racing classes. It could be my dad took me in there to get some parts from it, but I don't know. But I must tell you how impressed I was reviewing the life story and the sailing resume of this truly pioneering performance sailor who was ahead of his time in so many respects. So let's meet Harry Sindle.
Harry Sindle is being inducted posthumously as a past member of the Bay Head Yacht Club. Harry was a pioneering skipper in the Flying Dutchman class, having won 6 national championships before then winning a gold medal at the 1959 Pan American Games with Robert Wood as crew. Then in 1960, he and Mr. Wood represented the United States at the Olympic Games in Rome. As a sign of simpler times, Harry had the chance to tour the Rome countryside prior to the event, all while towing his boat behind an Italian sports car. In 1964, Harry finished second in the U.S. Olympic trials to eventual bronze medalist and sailing legend Buddy Melges. Prior to his years in the Flying Dutchman, Harry successfully campaigned Jet 14s, Thistles, Comets, and Lightnings on Barnegat Bay. Harry was also renowned as a designer and a manufacturer of recreational day sailors and Racing One designs, first at Siddons and Sindle in Island Heights, then later as general manager of Newport Boats in Gloucester, Virginia, where he relocated his family to, seeking a more rural setting to raise his children. There he helped found the Ware River Yacht Club. Some of the designs he is known for are the Newport models named Holiday, Blue Crab, Flipper, Skipjack, Kite, N17, and Surprise. He also designed the Gloucester 19, 20, 23, and 27. Other boats that he produced included the Hampton 1 design, Albacore, Lightning, Buccaneer 18, and Mutineer 15. Harry took particular pleasure in producing the Buccaneer 18 and enjoyed several years racing one with his daughter Sue.
That's a lot of boats. I'm thrilled that Harry's 2 sons, Brad and Robert, made the trip up from Virginia to be with us tonight and accepting on behalf of, for their father, Brad is going to accept. So let's welcome Harry Sindle into the Barnegat Bay Sailing Hall of Fame.
On behalf of the Academy, I'd like to thank you. What's wrong? I don't get out of the house much anymore, so forgive me. I asked Ed if it was okay because it was really hard for me to put my father's life into 5 minutes. So if you're like me out there and you hate not knowing how long something's going to go on, like a preacher, this will be 11 minutes and 39 seconds, okay? I ask for your patience. This is a story. It starts out about a father and his son and what sailing did for them. Many years ago here on the Jersey Shore, a businessman from Little Falls, Dutch Sindle, had a cottage on the shore. He was very athletic, played AAA ball, baseball, was a great bowler, skeet shooter, a fire chief, and was busy with his business. He had a young son, Harry, my father. Dutch was so busy, he really didn't seem to have much time to spend with his son. His wife, Ruth, gave him an ultimatum. Either he took an interest in his son, or she would consider divorce and find somebody who would. So Dutch and his son took up a hobby, the process of learning to sail together here on Barnegat Bay. They taught each other as they learned and went along. The son flourished, and eventually they even had a few sailboats in a rental fleet. They learned to race and participate together in lightnings, thistles, comets, until Dutch had heart disease, and even then he cheered Dad on from a boat that people over at Lavalette still told me they remembered, the Ma's Kitchen powerboat, and then the Queen Mary. Dad became a regatta winner. So he went to Rutgers on a full scholarship, then was drafted in the Army during the Korean War. His commanding officer was a very big into athletics and winning events for the base, and he heard about him, and my father spent many weekends participating in regattas representing his unit. His enlistment ended, he married his childhood sweetheart, Janet Taylor, in '53. They would have 4 children, 3 buoys and a gull. A future built-in crew, and the oldest, most shy, handsome, and humble is here speaking before you. The most successful came up with me. The kindest passed away from cancer at age 47, and the youngest, the gull, volunteered to sit with our mom, who is now at home in hospice at age 90, so that we could be up here. Sailing was Dad's passion. I don't know how many national regattas he won in the 50s and 60s, but when I was 2, he was in the gold medal in the U.S. and Pan American Games in Chicago, as you heard. In 1960, he'd be the representative to the Olympics in Rome. He and Mom bought that VW, and they toured Europe for 6 weeks, towing that Dutchman through the Alps, believe it or not. He was disappointed in his finish of 19th. When they returned from their adventure in Europe, I remember being held on the observation deck of an airport by my grandma Ruth as they disembarked from what was to become my passion, airplanes. Harry had a small business in Island Heights called Sindle. They made small boats, and I believe Comets, Jet 14s, I don't know, but I think they were all the new plastic boats. In '63, he relocated to Gloucester, Virginia to work in Mobjack manufacturing as a sales rep for the designer of the Chesapeake Bay racing boat, the Mobjack. He wanted to get his family into the country, and that's a move I'm kind of thankful for. It's too much traffic around here. We lived on 17 acres of marsh grass on the Mobjack Bay, 2 miles from the nearest house. The mosquito swits were so big they wore athletic supports. True, and they would regularly carry off the cat. Mobjack was soon bought by Browning Arms of Newport Boats, and they made Dad manager. They built the small boats, and the West Coast plant made the larger ones. In '64, he was second to the Olympic trials in the Dutchman to Buddy Melgus, who won the bronze. In '68, he trained with and against a fellow Gloucester, Virginia sailor, Bob James, who became the U.S. representative to Mexico. In the meantime, my brother and I learned to sail solo at age 6 and 8 in a boat called the Flipper, which was built by Newport Boats. Throughout my childhood, in whatever boats he was building and campaigning, many times I would be his crew. But Dad, I just want to fly planes. Around age 12, he insisted on being my crew at the races in different boats. Quote, "They know I can sail, you be the skipper." Okay, Dad, but I just want to fly planes, you know. He was one of the first laser dealers, and I can remember we had a couple of boats with sail numbers in the hundreds. At age 15, I remember finally being heavy enough to hold one down, somewhat successfully, and realized that girls and beer were involved in sailboat racing. I started really enjoying the regattas. And I just remember tonight that I won Best Sailor under age 17 in the Commodore's Cup and the Governor's Cup of Virginia in the laser. He was, at age 16, we took two albacores, which he was building albacores at the time, to Tampa Yacht Club in Florida. I sailed in the B division, while Dad and my brother sailed in the A. Out of 32 boats, I received 5 firsts and 1 fourth, with 1 throwout. Accepting the trophy at the dinner with a perfect score, the Commodore shook my hand and said, "Needless to say, young Sindle here will not be sailing in the B fleet again." I saw a quiet smile on my father's face. I started flying lessons at age 15 through the local Explorer Scouts. Flying is nothing but sailing, only sideways. It cost me $6.25 an hour, and that included the gas. I earned my private license after my junior year in high school. But try that today, I don't know. I digress. When I was 17, Dad was asked by Dick Gibbs of Chrysler Buccaneer fame to sail a boat he called the Whip in Yachting Magazine's one-of-a-kind regatta at the Los Angeles Yacht Club. Dad took me to crew with him, where I met someone at dinner named Dennis Connors. Who was that? Things were discussed about men named Dead Ted Turner, Buddy Melgus. Who were they? It was on the Pacific Ocean, out on a trapeze, that I was reminded I get seasick. Oh God. Short time after, I remember Dad telling me, "Hey, our picture's in Yachting Magazine." I was so excited. Maybe I could now show the girls that this marching band nerd was really an athlete. It was a great picture of my father in the boat. But all you saw of me were the tips of my feet above the railing. Seasickness was a problem to be revisited as foredeck man for Dad when he got into J24 racing. Once in a race at 3 a.m. somewhere in the Chesapeake with me and another crew member, miserably queasy, Dad came up from below, drinking a beer, and smiled and said, "Who wants brownies?" So when I was in college, Dad paid for a plane rental so I could fly him around and take aerial photos of his friends' home for Christmas presents. After about 15 minutes of me rolling the plane so he could get a shot, he said, "Geez, I'm getting a little motion sick." "Dad, you're in my element now. Would you like a beer and some brownies?" Dad wanted to try out once more for the Olympics when I was in college. "Hey, take a year off and let's try." "But Dad, I just want to fly airplanes." My dad was a quiet man. Once I asked him why, with all his trophies, more than half of them are hidden in the attic because Mom said they were ugly. Why wasn't he wealthy? Why can't racing be lucrative like golf or football or baseball? And his answer was, "It's hard to make it a spectator sport and to sell commercials." I do remember he was in a Budweiser commercial in the 60s as part of a group of sailors on the dock somewhere after a race. What did they get? A couple of cases of beer on ice. The cameras rolled on. Dad was great at sailing, designing sailboats, making them go, and racing. He was not, I repeat, not good at anything else that didn't have a sail and maintaining it. The joke was when the red light oil light in the car came on, it was time to check the oil. Once he bought a 45-foot sailboat and scheduled a christening party at our yacht club, the Ware River Yacht Club, on the Ware River on the Montauk Bay in Chesapeake Bay. He was one of the founding members. Anyway, on the way to the club, the prop shaft separated from the transmission, so we docked under sail. We adult kids that were on board were told, "Do not say a word," under penalty of death, about the mechanical problem. So his friends just thought he was showing off. Dad did get to teach a week each year for about 7 years for Steve Colgate as a guest racing expert. It allowed him and my mom a paid vacation to Florida, the Bahamas, or Puerto Rico. He did this for 7 years. I asked him why he stopped. He told me he was quietly sitting at the bar the night before our class started, and he heard people talking near him, and they said, "If he's so good, why haven't we heard of him?" So that got him. So Dad designed a bunch of boats, as you can read in there, for Newport boats, became Lockley Newport, Gloucester Yachts, just went on. He never owned the companies, just the building it was housed in. And in 1985, at age 56, the company was sold out from under him, and they went bankrupt within a year. I watched my dad flounder, selling insurance, trying to get something going with fiberglass manufacturing in that building, shower bases for the military, trash can lids for Busch Gardens in Williamsburg. But finally, he got into making the Buccaneer racing boat for Dick Gibbs and began racing that a lot of times with my little sister. He once again had a purpose. He wrote a rigging and handling book for the Buccaneer and started a parts business for all those versions of them and all of his personal boats designs. He was happy talking to sailing customers on the phone at home and selling them stuff. I, on the other hand, continued to fly planes, and after several glitches in the matrix, wound up as an international first officer on the Boeing 767 for an airlines whose initials stood for Trouble with Airline. Thieves, no. Try walking across the pond, okay? One day, in my late 30s, I reported to work at Kennedy Airport, and I met the captain I was to fly with. While checking the weather for the flight across the pond, he looked at the crew roster and then at me and he said, "Sindle, are you any relation to Harry Sindle, the sailor?" I said, "Yeah, I'm his oldest son." He said, "Oh my God, he's a legend up here." Remember, we had left Jersey 30 years earlier. It was a very pleasant trip that night. Not too long, I'm almost done. Not too long after this trip, I found out I had a very rare cancer. Became a study patient for the National Institutes of Health. At 39, I lost my career, had to sell my home, went bankrupt, had the midlife crisis from hell, and got divorced. I floundered for years. Finally, I got a job at a local marina doing their internet brokerage listings. I noticed that one of their sailing instructors, having some engine trouble, didn't feel comfortable sailing up the narrow channel to the creek. And the 5-knot wind was behind him. Geez, I said, maybe I could teach sailing. So Coast Guard captain's license and the ASA blessing of instructor later, I became one of the school's instructors. 3 out of the next 4 years, I received an award for being the outstanding instructor of the year. That's like 30 out of 2,000 or something like that. I finally had a purpose, teaching and moving boats about the bay for over a decade. I didn't realize all that I had learned by osmosis as a kid sailing with my father. I do remember that when we were sailing or racing together, he would rarely get impatient or yell at me. And that was the way I tried to teach. I remember teaching students practicing docking under power, watching as we approached the dock a little fast. The other students slowly sucked in their breath as the current skipper proceeded. I'd sat on my hands. They asked me how I could remain so calm. I said, well, the approach speeds were a lot slower than a Boeing jet. I would also show them how to get home up that long, narrow channel without an engine, even dead against the wind. Where did you learn how to do that? They would ask. I said, from my dad, because he never had an engine that worked. At 80, my dad had a small stroke and his legs began to quit on him due to Parkinson's. His memory started to falter. Someone who could tell you who was the first at the weather mark in a regatta in the 50s, and what the sail number, the names of the wife, the kids, and even the dog of his main competitors were, stopped taking calls from sailing customers, and he became bedridden. Mom took care of him at home, and I quit my job to live next door to help, thinking it might be a year. 7 long years later, he passed in 2020 at age 90. He and Mom married for 67 years. Hearing of this award made me finally think about my father's passing. So as I began the story, this is a story about a father and his son, and what sailing did for them. Thanks, Dad, for sailing with me. I appreciate y'all listening, and now if all the rest of inductees would please stick to that 5-minute limit.
That's a wealth of history, and that's the kind of history we need to preserve in whatever site we're imagining to just make the Barnegat Bay Sailing Hall of Fame alive again. Thank you, Brad.